What the is the Blue Beetle? This movie is what I would like to call misplaced. What I mean by that is, why is this placed in a movie theater? This is not a movie theater movie by any stretch of imagination. This is a movie that should only be allowed on streaming services. But yet here we are. It was like James Gunn was writing down a list of his upcoming projects that he had to take over now that he's the new head of DC, and he wrote down Blue Beetle because that was an upcoming project and it got mixed up in the paperwork, and it was like, okay, I guess this is now going on a movie theater, even though it doesn't deserve it. This movie is so painfully uninventive when it comes to this direction and artwork and cinematography that I don't even see what would be the reason for you to even go to the movie theaters other than you're Latino or you want to support Latinos in Latino filmmaking, which in that case, have at it. I would say, hey, yeah, definitely. But on a filmmaking aspect or anything surrounding the actual art of filmmaking, especially filmmaking that is theatrical, there's nothing here. This concoction of Spy Kids in Iron Man or any superhero movie that you've ever seen before clocks in at 2 hours and 7 minutes. Directed by Angel Manuel Soto. I haven't seen many of his films before. This is my first time I've ever seen a movie of his. And maybe in his other films, he has a little bit more art direction and a little bit more care behind the camera. But in this one, it's just super flat. It's kind of like the difference between Ryan Coogler when he was making movies that he was mostly invested in versus like the first Black Panther movie, where it was kind of just generically put together with a generic filter on top of it, and it kind of just looked like every generic action superhero movie, compared to like Wakanda Forever or Fruitvale Station or Creed, where you can just tell he had a little bit more passion behind the camera. So the way the films looked was a lot more intensive than the first Black Panther movie, which had pretty good characters, but the actual filmmaking and the cinematography behind it all was very, very lacking in creativity, and mostly just, I have a job to do. This is my job. I'm getting paid a lot of money, so I'm doing it. That's kind of what this movie feels like. I have a job to do. Like Angel was like, I have a job to do. This is the job. I went to school for filmmaking, or I've been doing filmmaking for a very long time, and this is what I'm good at. So this is what I'm getting paid lots of money to do. So I'm going to do it. But other than that, there's nothing creative in the actual filmmaking. Every shot, every scene is stilted and stiff, boring, just to get you from one scene to the next. Just place cameras there and let people riff off each other. At least that's what they try to do with the family here. The family here is somewhat annoying between the sister and, you know, how the sister, it's mostly just the sister, I'm not gonna lie to you. The grandmama barely speaks, the mother barely speaks, and the dad is the heart of the film, or at least he had heart to me the whole entire film. George Lopez is actually good as the uncle here. He's like this conspiracy theorist, paranoid. It's almost like Antifa. I'm not gonna lie to you. George Lopez puts in a pretty good performance here. It's not like amazing or anything like that, but you can definitely feel like this is a guy who at least to me, from what I got from his performance, is that this felt like a guy who liked superhero movies, and he's just excited to be a part of a superhero movie. So he's taking his chances to the best of his ability. Like I said, he's fun in here. You'll have a nice time watching him. Most of his jokes land. You know, sometimes when they some of his jokes don't really land. It kind of feels like they just say, "Hey, George, end the scene with a joke here, please." I don't really know how to end the scene, so just say something. And that sometimes can get annoying when you can feel like they just told George to ad-lib a line just to transition to the next shot. I've never known how to say this kid's name, so bear in mind I'm not gonna get it right here. So Xolo Murray Duyanas. Never knew how to say his name. I just seen him on Cobra Kai. He's good on Cobra Kai. He's good here. He gets the job done. He gets you from point A to point B. There's nothing that inventive going on with his character. He's just pretty much a teenage character. Even though he's not a teenager, he's an early 20s kid here. Even though he seems like a teenager when you look at the trailers and even parts of this movie, he feels like a teenager. A lot of this feels like a child's film more than it is like a grown-up action film, and that's why I said it's a concoction between Spy Kids, because that's what it feels like, almost like a Spy Kids movie, especially with the CGI, how they got the family all working together. And his love interest, played by Bruna Marquezine, Brazilian actress. She's just bad, man. Not in a bad way. She's bad in a good way. She's fine. She's beautiful. All the synonyms that have to do with beautiful, she's that. She looks good in this movie. Her acting, on the other hand, it's serviceable. It's not terrible, but it gets you from, once again, it's another point A to point B. Nobody here is going above and beyond. Everybody's acting, for the most part, is getting you from point A to point B, except for Susan Sarandon. Oh my God. She is terrible in this movie. Every line feels like she just learned it that day. Like they was like, we need a star name somewhere in this film, so let's just pick somebody out of a random hat who can bring possibly people into a film who's somewhat recognizable. Even though she's like probably the least recognizable with this cast of Xolo and George Lopez, but still, she is a very big recognizable name to the mainstream audiences. Most people know who Susan Sarandon is, I think, so they pretty much probably just came through with a dump truck, dropped a bag of money and said, hey, come make this movie, please. And she was like, all right, I ain't learning none of the lines. Whatever the lines are, you give them to me that day, I'll do what I can with them. Don't worry about me. I'm Susan Sarandon. I'll do something. And my gosh, she didn't do nothing with them besides give an atrocious performance. I'm legit talking about, I don't know if the Razzies is still available. I don't know if they're still doing what they're doing, but if there was, sign her up. Please nominate her. Someone needs to give her an award for how bad she is in this movie. Susan Sarandon, you are terrible in this movie. Another semi-bad, semi-okay performance is from Raul Julia, but at the same time, he's barely in the movie, or he barely has anything going on in this movie. He's kind of just bad guy, generic villain, henchman, who's secondary to Susan Sarandon. Every one of his lines are just generic. Your family is what makes you weak. And it's just like, oh my God, this shit. And then towards the end of the movie, they finally give you his backstory. Like this whole time, he's just been silent Terminator man. And then randomly at the end of the movie, they just dump out every piece of his backstory at you at once. And you're like, what the hell is going on here? Dog, we have 5 minutes left. Why am I getting this man backstory now? None of this was pieced together throughout the whole film. Everything just sort of got rushed in at the last moment for whatever that ending was. You guys are just winging it. I mean, I knew the writing was going to be bad from the beginning when they started off the story, by how contrived they made the story go just to start it off. There was no other reason for him to get the Scarab to become Blue Beetle in this movie unless they made it a very contrived way for him to get the Blue Beetle Scarab. You are like sitting there like, dog, there's no way you wrote that way. And there's another character in here. It's like some Latino dude. I don't know why they keep focusing on him. He was eating a burger at the beginning of the movie, and then they keep focusing on him. I don't know who he is. If anybody knows who this guy is, let me know. I'm not tapped in with the Latino community. All in all, this movie was just generic action superhero movie that does not deserve to be on a movie theater, but I am happy that it is for the Latin community. Hopefully this can be their Black Panther. People rush out to the theaters to go see it, and it makes billions of dollars. Most likely won't, because anybody can look at this film, even from the trailer, and say, this looks like absolute rubbish. 5 out of 10.